Similarly, we can create another publisher for our email. This is an interesting email publisher, email valid. For first one is, let's call that as email empty. So email can go through different validations. First is more like, let's call this as email required publisher. So first validation is more like email validation field, email is already having any value or not. Once you start inputting something, then we can check. The next check is that whether that entry is a valid email entry or not. That's a second check. Third one is more like, once that valid entry is made, we make a call to the server and check whether that email is already used or not for sign up. If that is also matching, then we can use that value. It's like then a complete valid value. So first check is like email is required. So I'm just using same construct which we used. Email map is, if it's not empty, erase it and make it as a boolean value. So the email check, first check is done. Then let me just create one more like similar to email required. Then I can just call it as email valid publisher. This is more like I'm going to use the first publisher and get that value of the valid email, or get the value which is entered for the email. I'm not saying it's already valid. It's more like get that value and check whether it's a valid email or not. So there we are going to use regular expressions to check whether that email is valid or not. So let's just remove this, use the email required publisher value to map. So this is going to return me a boolean here. So I need both things. I need even the email value. I cannot just return a boolean here. So for that, let me just create a email, more like I'm going to create it as a tuple, email string and is valid boolean. So two values I'm going to send through this email required field. So it's pretty simple here. So I can just say email is my $0. This anyway is publishing the string values, and then the first next one will be the validity, whether it is empty or not. That is the second valid case. This is now returning me a proper value. Always I'll get this email and is valid through this second. So I'm just transforming this email property, mapping it to email and the validation state, two states. That's how you map it. And then I can just use this here. Like I can just say, let me just define, I've already defined a function extension, two extensions actually. Okay, let me just create an extension in this view model itself, but this is more an extension to string, not for the view model. So first one is a regular expression validating my string and seeing whether it's a valid email or something. So I have a regular expression which is validating my string and then saying, evaluating and returning it as boolean. Like if it is true, then it's a valid email. If not, it's not valid. So again, I'm going to translate this. Again, this is my second observable where I'm checking for the validity of the email, not the string. Required is already validated using this. Once this required is fine, I'll come here and say, okay, my email is valid now. Now my required is valid now. Let me start sending the email right now. So I can do something like similar thing. So I'm gonna even here send email. And is it valid again? Is the email valid? This was more like, is the string valid, like it, whether it is the string is empty or not. That's the next step here. Using that same observable, I can create another observable and map that value which is carrying two things right now. So I'm going to return even here an email, and the $0 is whatever I sent through this. I'm going to send that, and also I'm going to say is valid. $0 is again a string, so I can just use that $.email dot is valid email, which is nothing but this extension, which is again because this email is a string type, and I can always check whether that email is valid or not. So I managed to create one publisher from another one. So I started with this one and then created this one. So now let's define these in the init side. So I need to first start publishing whether a required field is entered or not. So for that, let me define the email required publisher, first thing, similar to this, and then receive it on run loop dot main. And again I can do a drop first, and then I can map it to that error value. So here it's more like first check $0 is valid. So if my string is valid, then I can, if not valid, if it's valid, then I will not send any error message. If not, it's similar, like email is missing. So this is my first case. Let's see whether, like after I assign, let's see whether it works. So this is how you assign it to a property. So I have already something called as email error, which is defined in this email error. This is defined here, and that's also done. Final step, to store this within the cancelable bag, just to release once the dinit happens. Let's also define the dinit here, and then say cancelable bag dot removal. So I guess this is how you use it, but even if you are not having this, Swift will take care of the memory management. But I'm just showing you this pattern of storing this cancelable bags. So we defined now the email part as well. So that let's just run and see whether this email part is running. Then we'll go to the next part where we'll define the next one. So username is test, that works. Test email, test @ so it should show email is missing, but I have not defined the other part where I need to validate for the validity of the email. So that, let's do that. So this is working now. Email is missing. A little difficult to read, is it? So let's change this color. You can do that. So I'm done with that part where if the email required field is not entered, then I'm sending. Now let's use the other one, email valid publisher. So email valid publisher is going to start publishing as soon as so I can always apply a filter on it and stop it from publishing until the time the validity is boolean is valid. So if this is valid, I'm gonna start sending the next set of I can just map it and then say, okay, this is not the case. I should have done it here, not here. Okay, let me do that at the top. Before this, I need to show something. So email valid publisher has to first check or filter on. I think I missed that. Okay, not okay, I not missed that out. I just missed that out here. So this needs to only start publishing. Filter, need to apply a filter, and only after the email required publisher is done with its work, like it starts validating. If email required publisher value is valid, and I apply a filter. Only after, filter means it's not going to send any values until this is mapped, like $0.is. If it is valid, only then I'm going to start sending the validations towards the valid email ID or not. So I just applied it here on the email valid publisher. So I guess this is clear. Email required publisher does not need any filter because that's the first step. You're checking for its required validity. Once that is valid, filter on. Then you're checking for the email valid, the client side validation, checking the string that you have entered is a valid email. So that's a check here. So once that is done, it's plain same things. Okay, it's like email valid publisher dot receive on the, how does it give me always this run loop dot main, and then I don't need to drop here because we already started validating on the required, so I don't need to drop anything here. But then I just need to map it to again $0 is valid. If it is valid, then empty. Otherwise I should say email is not valid. So the error message is changing from email is missing to email is not valid. So you'll see the magic happening now. Assign to same field, because it's going to be set to the same field, no change, just that it's using another publisher to get its value. This way you get a clear segregation between different error messages. We are not just combining everything and saying if it's different publishers. You get values in different ones. And then finally you will say store, because this is again another observer. You just need to say you will have to keep it in the store. So valid publishing is also done. Let's run and see. First thing, this works. We have tested it already. Email. So as soon as I start typing, it will say it's not valid. If I remove that, it will say it's missing, because if there is no value, it's the first validation itself says that required field is missing. Then I start typing something. Now it starts saying it's not a valid field. But once I enter a proper email, it's fine. So it's gonna give me no errors. So if you're done, second level of validation here. One more level of validation is required. Now after this, it's gonna hit the server and see whether this email is existing or not, or it's already consumed by another user to get signed up. So if that is happening, again it's going to give a error message saying okay, you are not valid yet. So I'm limiting to that to the next tutorial, because that is again going to be something where I'm going to introduce APIs with Combine. So you'll use future there, something called as similar to a publisher called future, where it'll wait for a response and then send a signal back to whoever is consuming or subscribing to it. So that's another one we will take up in the next episode, which is pretty much coming soon. So we are done with two client-side validations here. Email valid, password valid, email valid, username valid. Now we need one more for the required server side, which I'm just limiting for the next one. But let's define the rest of the things. Password is again a simple thing, similar to how we have defined it. Let's define one more for password. Just gonna copy something like password is going to always also go through this required thing. So password required publisher, any publisher, password is valid. Password call it password is valid. If not empty, it can publishes. Similarly, it'll have a password valid publisher. This is more like I'm gonna apply a validation to my password, more like strength this should be this much, that kind of a thing here. So this is going to use my earlier one and then gonna map filter and see whether the first validation has happened correctly or not. $0 dot is valid, should work. Okay, so once that's done, I'm going to introduce something here. So my password $0 is fine. Now this should be like something like a password is going to check for the strength. So I'm going to introduce is valid password function, like similar to how we defined an extension here. So I have a is password function. This is nothing but it's going to see whether a minimum 8 character is there and then at least one alphabet and one number is there or not. So that's the password validation I've given. Hope that's the password. So I'm just going to say is valid password dot is valid password. So once this password validation is successful, we will erase it back to it just needs a bool here because it's more like we don't need the password value here. It's more like a validation, so I can just say this is enough because I don't need the value again here. At least here I need it again once more in email valid case because I'm gonna make a server response, but here there is no server response. So password, it's going to be a bool and never type. Okay, I just messed it up. Okay, $0.password. Then I just gonna return a boolean never. Guess that should be fine. So let's see, is $valid password, and then let's do that binding here. Password required publisher, receive on, then same blah blah, run loop dot main dot drop first, again similar to how we did that, then map that value, and then see $0 dot is valid. Nothing needs to be done, else we'll say password is missing and then assign it to our password field, password error field. That's it. Store this in the cancelable bag. It should be working now. After that, we defined a password valid publisher, just checking for a strength of the password. So let's do that. Password valid publisher dot receive in the receive on run loop dot main, map it to again $0 is valid. Okay, here it's just $0 because we just need it's a boolean already, so we can just see if it is $0, no error. If not, I'll just say what is the error I defined. Password must be 8 characters with one alphabet and one number. So that's the error I have defined, and that is what this the regular expression is going to do. So that's it's going just going to set that value. Now I can assign it to the same things and then store it in the cancelable. So I'm just copying those things. So let's check that now. Let's run. Two things should work for password here. So once we are done with the confirm password, we'll wind up this episode, and then in the next one we'll see how we can do the okay. Before that, I also need to show you how to enable disable this button. I'll also show that before winding this up. So username email is already taken care. Password, is missing. I type something, it's giving me wrong things. Let me check what's going wrong. $0 should be is, what did I do wrong? Is the validation? I guess that's a problem with, I just said not, I guess that's a problem. Here it should be is valid password. So if this is valid, filter is valid, then I'm checking for a valid password here. Now it should work. Yeah, required field test 1 1 2 3 4. So now it's fine. It should be 8 minimum, and if I don't have any characters, testing, no, it's fine. So it should be minimum 8 characters and 1 number. So that's also working now. So final thing, not the final thing, final field on which we need to apply the validation is required validation. Two similar things for confirm password as well. Confirm password required validator. Let's confirm password. Nothing major. Again, you can just keep copy paste this whole thing and say, I can just say confirm password required publisher, and then change this to confirm error. Confirm password as a confirm password is missing. That's also done. The final thing is this required publisher also needs to have a confirm valid required confirm password valid publisher. This is more like checking whether password and confirm password are both matching. So you can just pick that up, and here it does not have a dependency on the previous one. It's more like it depends on two things here, password and confirm password. So I need to do a combine late test here. So I'm just saying confirm password valid publisher. So I can just call it as password equals equal publisher. It's more like independently I'm checking. It does not depend on the first observable. Actually, it depends on the first observable. So I can just say, but I can always use this one because it, or even the other one, that's fine. So I can just say I will just use these two, publishers dot combine latest. I'm just combining values of these two, password valid publisher and confirm password required publisher. So for that I need, okay, even I can use this. There's no harm in using this because it's anyway going to, it needs to match, and anyway it's going to give me a error for if it's not entered. So I'm just going to use these two, password and combine password, confirm password and combine it, and then I can say dot map. So it's going to be two parameters. I can just show you, confirm password string value and confirm password string value, two parameters coming using this combine latest. I can just say if both are equal, it's valid, and then we are erasing it to as a boolean again, bool. It's pretty simple, isn't it? I'm checking for password and confirm password, and then sending an error message. So the first message anyway is going to come from the required fields. That is going to emit confirm whether those fields are entered or not. So even we can keep a check here, like guard, or maybe even apply a filter here. Like password, it's going to only work if both the values are existing. $0.0 is empty. If not empty, and $0.1 is if not empty. So both has to have values for this to work. So we are just restricting this using a filter again here. So I have this password equal publisher as well defined. It's just checking with the password and confirm password, both values are equal. So once that's there, but it's even okay, it's better that I could have used the other valid ones, the final valid ones, instead of this. But then this is also making sense. It's there is nothing stopping you even from using, let's say, password valid per publisher and the confirm password required publisher. These also you can combine and use, but then I'm limiting it to something like this, where if not empty, I can just compare it and say, okay, these are valid, but then some other validation is failing. So anyway, this is not going to let you go to the next step, because password has to map a criteria before it can be valid. So even if confirm is valid, then according to confirm, that's fine, because confirm has to match with password for it to work. But whatever I'm going to do is use this value to set it as an error for confirm password. So same things, and say password does not match. That's simply that, and I don't need to drop anything here. So I'm just setting that as a error for confirm password error. So that's also done. Now this should do our trick of validating all the fields. Let's do that. Steps, test, that's fine. Email is not valid, email is missing, test@email.com, that's valid. Password, test, so it's already showing password does not match, so that's also working. Test, 1 2 3 4, that's valid. 1 2 3 4 still shows error is still there. Test 234. Still says password does not match. So something is wrong. Password equal publisher. Both these values are not empty. Only then publish this. They should both be equal. And the value received, if it is valid, nothing should be shown. Otherwise, show passwords does not match. So I'm not sure what's going wrong here. Test 1 2 3 4. That's fine. Now if I come to the next field, test 1 2 3 4. No, that's fine. And again, it's not valid. Test 1 2 3 4. That's fine. Test 1 2 3 4. So it's working. So there's no problem. So both are the same. So all the fields are valid now. So I guess I should limit this episode to this much, because if I continue with sign up, I think enabling and disabling sign up can be taken up along with the next episode, because that is going to be a shorter one compared to this. So we have discussed so much in this one. So validation on the UI side with the view model is complete now. Now there is a bit of server side validation pending, and with that value of, let's say, a email validation on the server side, where we check that email is already used in the server to sign up. If not, it sends a response back and invalidates this field again, saying email is already used. So that is something we'll take up. And once that is done, if everything is valid, then we also will do something of a toggle of sign up button enabling and disabling based on these all these publishers which we defined to make this enable and disable. It's very interesting how we do that. And once that is final, and then we can make a call to the server to sign up the user. And once a successful response comes back, we will use futures to receive that and then show that in the sign up view itself that the view is successful, and then we reset everything. So that's something which is coming up in the next episode. Very interesting topic again. This was, I hope, was also interesting for you, because it used a chaining of each and every publisher and made it very modular. Each and everything, every validation is part of a publisher, and then we made it happen in using the binding architecture, using a view model. So this is what all of the logic is now residing, at least the client logic is residing in a view model, and your view is just having to care about the layout. It just uses the values or signals coming from the view model to show your view. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, like the whole new approach which is being done using SwiftUI. Even I'm like really enjoying the approach, and even want to take it forward using a view model coordinator pattern, where we can transition between screens and all the things which I'm thinking of in the upcoming episodes. So this was, I hope, informative. If you have any comments, send me a comment to the comment section, obviously, and then keep subscribed, and share it if you like. And that's it for this episode, and the code base is available in the Patreon site if you want to have access to it. It's a subscription based thing. It'll help me if you are subscribing, and then monetizing my channel. It also helps me that way. Otherwise, just watch these episodes and then continue supporting this venture. So until the next episode, it's bye from me.